Hey sewers, welcome back to Sewing with Sin. I have not made a video in a while, so I'm back and I am remaking today a shirt that was the very first shirt that I made when I started sewing. And I thought, since I'm making another one, whipping it up really quick, I will make a tutorial. This is such a great shirt to start your sewing journey on. It's called Shirtno1 by 100 Acts of Sewing. And 100 Acts of Sewing is a sewing company by Sonia Phillips, who has created like a bunch of patterns that are really great for beginning sewers. So this shirt I can make at this point, you know, like 2 years into sewing now, I can make it in probably under 2 hours. It's really easy. And if you are sewing something for the first time, I highly recommend this top. It's super cozy, very basic, and I love it. Like, I go back to it and make it in a lot of different colors because it's really versatile. So I'm going to start with cutting out the fabric because I don't believe I have any tutorials on cutting fabric. So I thought I would show that process with you now, and let's get started. All right, so I have my fabric ready, and this shirt is supposed to be cut on the fold. So my fabric is folded right here, and the selvage, which is like the end of the fabric, is over here on this side. You just can't see it on my table. And I've cut out for myself a size medium because I like this shirt to be nice and loose and cozy. I can fit into a small, but I would just rather it be a little bit bigger. Also, something that I didn't cut exactly on the pattern is the neckline. I personally like my neckline to be a little bit higher. So on my pattern, what I did was I just traced the line that was the line above it, above medium. So this line comes a little bit further up just because I want my shirt to be a little bit higher on the neckline. So then I have my rotary cutter. You can use a rotary cutter for cutting your pattern. I'm sorry, your fabric, or you can use like shears for fabric. And then I just placed my weights all around it and smooth out your fabric. Make sure there's no bumps underneath here. And I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So this should only take a second. This shirt is pretty simple to cut. Oh, also something else that I did, I don't know if you could see down here, but oh yeah, actually I was gonna say, I think I like mine a little bit longer, the top. So if you wanted your shirt longer, you would just extend the pattern. So you would cut the length of maybe a size large if you wanted the length of the top to be a little bit longer. If you want your shirt to be more cropped, you can still cut out the same size, but then just change the length down here. So I'm pretty much cutting out a true size medium. When you're using a rotary cutter, if you've never used one before, like I use this finger, that's the whole purpose of this little grippy thing right here. And I'm just going to give it some pressure. I'm holding down the fabric with my other hand to make sure that it doesn't shift around. And then coming up the side. And I'm just constantly checking the fabric to make sure that it's not shifting upwards, because I'm cutting upwards. Sometimes it will shift a little bit. And this rotary cutter is really great for the round edges right here. So I'm gonna go around. Be really careful not to cut into your pattern like I did a little bit, but that's okay if you did, no biggie. And then one more part. Look how fast that was. That didn't take very long. And you could shift the weights around if you need to. This shirt is so small though that you Could probably just keep your weights in place. Okay, then don't forget to close your rotary cutter. I've cut myself so many times because I didn't close it. And then before you just rip the fabric out, like remove it really slowly. This is so satisfying. This is one of my favorite steps, removing it really slowly, because there might be a little snag. There might be a piece of fabric that didn't cut completely. And it looks like mine cut. So then you're gonna remove that, because this is the pattern for the front and the back. So it doesn't really matter for me which is the front and which is the back, because I'm doing a solid color, which is inside and which is outside, sorry. Then I move that out of the way, and I'm just gonna shift the rest of my fabric up, and I'm gonna lay this back down again and cut the second piece. So make sure to cut 2 pieces. You need front and back of your top. I'll be back when I'm done. And the next step after you're done cutting is you're going to take your front and back pieces and pin them together with the right sides facing. So when they say right sides, they mean the outside of the shirt, not what's going to be on the inside. So you're going to pin it all along here and up on the top. And I'm going to show you that with my own shirt in just a moment. And then it says set it to straight stitch. And you know, these numbers, you might have them on your sewing machine. I don't. I'm using today a really basic sewing machine. And the stitch that I use is right here in the middle. So if you have maybe like a digital sewing machine, you might have these numbers and you could set it to that. So let me show you what that looks like pinned and sewing around those edges. Okay, so I'm gonna put my right sides together, and these actually used to be old curtains, so I don't know if you can tell. I think you can. This is going to be my right side, and this is my wrong side. They were curtains, so like the sun kind of bleached the side, and it's perfect though. I'm reusing it, and this can be the front of my shirt, and this will be on the inside and nobody will see it. So I'm gonna lay the right side facing up, and then I'm gonna get the other top and find the right side of that one. So here's the right side. This is the wrong side. Okay, so you're gonna put the right side facing down. Right sides are together. So what you should be seeing right now, if you're doing it with me, is the wrong side is here and the wrong side is on the table. Okay, because really you're sewing it inside out right now. You don't want to sew it right sides out, because that means that your shirt will be backwards, basically inside out. Okay, so now I'm just taking the sleeves, and I'm going to start, actually it's probably easier to start up here on the top. So I'm going to find these points, line them up, and pin all the way down to the sleeve. So you don't need that many pins. And by the way, I'm using like this is a linen. So this is gonna be really cozy. This shirt works really well with like quilted cotton, linen. I suppose you could make it out of some kind of rayon. It might hang a little bit too much though. So now I'm working on the other side. I'm matching up the shoulders, and I'm just using 3 pins, but if you're brand new to sewing and you're a little nervous about things shifting around, use as many pins as you need. Okay, that's what mine looks like so far. And you could even see, like, as I'm lining up, the sleeves are not lined up perfectly. That is okay. Don't worry about that right now if yours happens to look like that. It just might mean like you cut it slightly off, like I probably cut it slightly off, and that's okay. Now I'm working on the armpits underneath the sleeve. And I'm just going to pin it all the way down to the bottom of the top. The bottom of the top. The bottom of the shirt. I'm going to say that instead. All right, I have the top pinned, the shoulders, underneath the armpits, all the way down to the bottom on both sides pinned. Now I'm going to take it over to the machine and I'm going to sew it at 1/2 inch seam allowance. So on the machine, oh, sorry, it was so shaky. I'll try to get better at that. 1/2 inch seam allowance. For me, that's right here on my sewing machine. So when I line up the shirt, which I'm going to do in just a second, you'll see that the edge of the fabric should line up right here with the edge of this line. Your sewing machine, hopefully, tells you where 1/2 inch is at. Mine just doesn't because it's so basic. So I'm going to start with the shoulder first, which is the top of the, so here's the neckline right here. And I'm going to start right here with the shoulder. And what you want to do is, before you even put it in, remove that first pin, and I'm holding down the fabric with my other hand. And then I'm going to line up, let me zoom in a little bit so you can see. I'm lining up the edge of my fabric with that 1/2 inch seam allowance, which is right there, remember? And also where your presser foot is, I'm lifting it up and making sure that it's at the edge of the fabric up here too. And it looks pretty good. I've lined it all up, 1/2 inch seam allowance, and make sure to back stitch. So here's what I mean by that. You go forward a few stitches and then reverse and then go back again. Why do we do that? So that the thread doesn't come unraveled later on. So you always back stitch at this side, and when you're at the end over here, you're going to back stitch again. I'm not pushing my fabric, I'm just guiding it. Again, the edge of the fabric is at 1/2 inch seam allowance still, all the way. Remove the pins along the way. And here I am at the edge. I'm going to go to the edge and then I'm going to back stitch and come back to the end. Raise your presser foot. Don't forget to raise your needle. And then trim that thread. Trim the other thread. I like to do this all now instead of at the end. And voila, the shoulder seam is done in less than 30 seconds. So now I'm going to do my other shoulder seam, and then I'm going to do, actually before I do my other shoulder seam, let me just show you what it looks like when you're kind of going around. So this is the sleeve and this is the armpit right here. So that might feel a little tricky for you if you're sewing for the first time, because there's like a little roundabout right there. So let me just do it with you right now. I'm going to remove my needle. And don't forget to back stitch. And so even, oops, there's like a little piece of thread stuck right there. There we go. And I'm still lining it up with 1/2 inch seam allowance. And as I'm going around this edge, I'm still making sure to kind of maneuver the fabric just a tiny bit so it always stays at 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just kind of shifting it with this hand. Remove your needle. Shift a tiny bit around. My hand is guiding it along the way. rest should be pretty easy peasy because it's just straight all the way down. You could see right here, I didn't cut it completely even, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. If that bothers you, you would trim that and just make sure it's totally even. Don't forget to back stitch at the end. And you're gonna do the same for the opposite side of the shirt now. All right, you'll see in her book, in her directions, after you're done sewing your straight stitch, she has a whole section on sewing French seams. I'm gonna skip that for now. If you want it to get fancy, you could sew French seams, but I'm just trying to whip through a really quick project, so I'm not gonna do that. The next step is working on the neckline, but actually, why does she not talk about the seams? Where is it at? Because I'm going to use zigzag stitch instead of sewing French seams, and I don't actually think that she has directions in here for that. I think she only has directions for French seams, so I can just show you that right now. I don't want to cut the neckline yet. I'm going to work on that tomorrow because it's actually kind of late for me right now. So I'm going to take you back over to the sewing machine. And to close up your seams, you can use zigzag stitch, or if you have a serger that looks something like that, you can use a serger. I have a serger and have not learned how to use it yet, so it's still sitting in the box. Yeah, so I got a serger maybe 3 weeks ago, almost a month ago, and I just haven't had the time this month to take it out of the box and learn how to use it. But if you have a serger, that is a really fast way to close your seams. I'm going to show you on my basic sewing machine how to do that. But first, what you want to do is grade your seams. Grading your seams is just a fancy word for trimming this excess fabric right here. So you could see that my seam line is that white thread, and I'm gonna get my fabric shears and I'm gonna trim pretty close. I mean, I don't really know exactly how much. Let me just show you. I'm gonna trim pretty close to where that seam allowance is at. So I'm just trimming off that excess fabric to reduce the bulk. I should just show you this on the table. It's really hard to do it in the air. Hold on. Much better. Here we go. So I'm just trimming the excess fabric, trimming it all the way, trimming it down, so there's not a lot of bulk. Get rid of that. And then it's ready for the next step. I only did it on one shoulder seam. You should do it on the other shoulder seam and all the way along the sides as well. Here we go. Here's what all of my seams look like now. It is okay if it's not all the exact same length. You could see right here, there's a little spot, I don't know, where my scissors got stuck or something. Now you're gonna take that over to the sewing machine. Make sure that you're set to zigzag stitch. You could do a tighter zigzag if you want. I'm gonna be a little lazy and do the looser one because it's just slightly faster. And again, I'm just whipping up a really quick cheapy top out of a curtain, so I'm not trying to make this really fancy in a super long project. All right, now when you're putting this in there, you're not going to do it at 1/2 inch seam allowance, because look what will happen. If you put it at 1/2 inch seam allowance, your zigzag stitch is going to be all on the inside and you're going to have a really small shirt. So what you're going to do this time when you're closing the seams with zigzag stitch is you're going to line up the center of that hole. So your needle is going to go through where that hole is at. And you want your zigzag to be right from the edge of your fabric to the edge of this seam allowance. And what you're trying to do is close off all of this fabric. Otherwise, when you wash it, it's going to start to fray and it's just going to start to fall apart. So the whole purpose of closing your seams is so that your fabric doesn't fall apart when you wash it. So it's going to just close it up like this. Here we go. Don't forget to backstitch. Here we go. I'll zoom in a little bit too so you could see. So this time I'm just kind of, my eye is not really looking over here anymore like it was before. My eye is looking straight at this area to make sure that this needle is going back and forth, and it should look something like this. So I'm closing up all of this open fabric right here. Don't forget to backstitch, and then go forward, lift up your presser foot, raise your needle, always raise your needle, cut that excess string, and let's see what it looks like. It should look something like that. And now I'm going to do that to all of the open seams, all the shoulder seams, all the side seams. I'm at the curve right here in the armpit, and I just wanted to show I'm going a little bit slower, and my left hand is like an L shape guiding it this way. Not really pushing it, I'm just sort of guiding it. So you'll always want to go a little slower when you're at a curve. Of course, you can go faster when it's a straight line. And the hard part is over. Go all the way down to the end and don't forget to close your seam, meaning backstitch. All right, all of your raw edges should now look like, I don't know why I turned the shirt right side out already. I was not ready for that step. It should look like this. Then what you're gonna do next, this is the last step before I come back tomorrow. And for you, it won't even be tomorrow, it'll be the same video. Okay, so the next step is gonna be the neckline. But before we do the neckline, what you wanna do is move over to the iron, and you're gonna iron out your seams. So you have to decide which is gonna be, right now, for me it doesn't matter. This is the back, this is the front, this is the front, this is the back, it doesn't matter. But you have to decide which one is gonna be the front. Because first of all, you're gonna have to cut your neckline in a little bit. That's tomorrow for me. But you have to decide where the front is, because you're gonna iron this seam to the back. So for me, I'm just gonna put a little pin, and this is gonna help me remember this is gonna be the back of my shirt. So I'm gonna move over to the ironing board area. All right, so I put a pin. This is helping me remember that this is going to be the back of the shirt. So the back of the shirt is facing down on the table. And I'm just going to press the seams towards the back of the shirt. So I'm pressing them this way. Whoa, that's really hot. Towards the back of the shirt. Don't worry about that right there. I could fix that later. So right now, you could see, hopefully you could see they're facing towards the back of my shirt right now. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the side seams. They should be ironed towards, this is the back of my shirt, this is the front of my shirt. So I'm gonna iron them that way. I mean, if you iron them towards the front, that's fine too, no big deal. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that around all the seams. Okay, I'm back to work on the neckline. What you wanna do first is decide which is the front of your shirt. And you should have already decided that if you ironed your seams. So remember I told you to iron the seams towards the back of your shirt? I already did that. And so what you're gonna do next is you wanna try on the shirt, put it on, and then use chalk if you have chalk. If you don't have chalk, maybe you have a like a drawing pencil for fabric, like a fabric pencil. If you don't have that, that's okay too. You can use like a little pin. So you're gonna try it on, right? And then you wanna decide where do you want the neckline. So for me, I personally like necklines further up because the neck is going to be sort of like a boat shape. It's not truly round like this. So take that into consideration too, that when you trim this neckline down, if you don't want all of this shoulder part to be exposed, then don't go down too far. So for me, I don't go down very far at all. I'll probably, like you would try yours on, I'm not trying mine on, I'm just kind of winging it because I've made this shirt so many times. And then after you make that mark, I made a little mark right there, you would then grab the shirt and open it up sideways. So what I mean by sideways is now I'm going to match the two shoulder seams. And this is now the front of my shirt. Okay? Remember that mark that you made? I'm going to show you next what to do with that mark. Okay, next step, you should have put the two shoulder seams together, and this right here is the front of the shirt. Let me show you one more time just in case. So here's the front. I connected the two shoulder seams together, and now I'm going to flip it sideways. So both of your sleeves, one sleeve should be here, one sleeve should be here. And this is the neckline right here. So if you made that mark, it should look something like that, or maybe you put a little pin right there. And then you're gonna lay it flat on your table, on your surface, and get a pair of scissors, get your fabric shears, and then you're going to cut from that line that you just made in the shape of a curve up to the shoulder seam and stop right there. So this is the only shirt pattern, by the way, that I've ever done that you have to cut a neckline like that. But the reason why I think she does this is just to make it super simple. Otherwise, the pattern wouldn't be as basic as it is right now. So cut it little by little if you're not sure how low you want to go. So you can cut a little bit off and scoop the neck. I'm going to show you that right now. And then try it on, and if you realize like, oh, it's a little too high, then do it again and go a little bit further. So it's better to cut just a little bit than to cut a lot and it's way lower than you wanted and you can't really do anything about that. So let me come back to mine. So here's where I drew my line. And I mean, you could do like a full line, right? Like you could kind of shape the neck and connect it to that line. So I just connected it from here to here. And then I'm personally trying to cut it in the shape of like, I don't know, like a tiny curve. And then it really is like your preference too. Like if you like a wider neck, you would cut it slightly different. So this is about how much I cut off of mine. And then I'm gonna open mine up. And hopefully you could see that. Now you can tell where the front is, right? The front is slightly lower than the back. So what I'm gonna do next, and also I want you to notice that the curve is not perfect right here, but that's okay, because once I add the binding to this, it'll all pretty much even out and it'll look straight. So what I'm gonna do next is try this on and then cut a little bit more if I need to cut a little bit more. It's pretty close to my neck, so I might cut a little bit more, but you do you. Cut a lot, cut a little bit. But like I said, a little bit at a time, so that way you don't have to waste fabric if you really don't like how low it is. So I'll be back after I try mine on. Here's what my neckline looks like. I didn't end up trimming anymore, so I just took off a tiny bit because I just feel more comfortable with the higher neckline. Here's what it looks like from the side. So you could see kind of like the neckline scoops out like that. So if you go further down, it's gonna scoop out more right here towards the shoulders too. So I'm pretty satisfied with this. Now I'm gonna take it off and go on to the next step. I wanna show you what the next step is gonna look like when you're finished. So you're going to close that neck with something called bias tape, or bias facing, I think people call it too. And what that is another piece of fabric that you use to close off the raw edges. Because what you will not do is like a hem. So you might think like, oh, I'm gonna do a hem like that. If you did a hem like that, it would change the whole neckline. So what you will do though is hem the shoulder, the sleeve, and then you would also hem the very bottom. And in her instructions, she suggests, I think maybe a 1/2 inch seam. Yeah, she says double fold over the hem 1/4 inch and then a 1/2 inch. So you fold it over twice. That's of course like what it says here, but what I would recommend is to try on the shirt again and decide like, do I want my hems to go all the way up a 1/2 inch? Decide like where you want your hem to be. Because this is your shirt. Oh my gosh, I just got distracted. My cat and my dog are playing right now. Same thing with the bottom. Try it on and like fit it for yourself. And when you try it on, by the way, try it on inside out. So I'm skipping this step right now because this step is a little bit more tedious, and I'm actually gonna make a separate video for this step. So you'll see that coming next. What I'm skipping forward to right now is the hem of the sleeve and the hem of the bottom. So go try your shirt on. That's what I'm gonna do too. And fold it up however you want the length of the bottom to be. So she suggests like a 1/2 inch. You could measure out a 1/2 inch and see like, do I like a 1/2 inch or do I actually want it to be longer? You could do less than that if you want. Remember, you're gonna fold it not just one time, but 2 times to close that open seam. So what I like to do is just decide like, is this where it's gonna be? If this is where I want it, I'll pin it in that place. Put a pin right there, maybe even put 2. And do the same thing for your sleeve. Fold it up to where you want it to go and put a little pin right there. And then take it off really carefully and bring it back to your table, because I'm gonna walk you through the hems next. Here's my pin where I just tried it on to get the right length for my hem. So this is the bottom of my shirt right now. I've tucked the rest of the shirt up because I'm just gonna work with one side of the hem. So for me, I measured out that I want mine to be at 1.5 inches. And you're gonna need some kind of measuring tool. It doesn't have to be this, right? But you're gonna wanna measure all the way across, because like right here, for example, I haven't folded it up to match 1.5 inches. So you're gonna fold the shirt up at whatever length you've decided, and just check all these different points to make sure that it's the same length. That way, when you put the shirt on, it's not all a wobbly hem at the bottom. You want it to be as straight as possible. So I just did a quick check around. If it's a tiny bit different, that's okay. And if this is your first time making a shirt, that's not a big deal. Then you want to iron that down. So press it down. And then flip the shirt to a different area. Measure out whatever length yours was. So for me, it was 1.5 inches. So I'm going to check several different points to make sure it's at 1.5 inches before I iron anything down. Then I'm going to iron the next part down. So you're going to do that all the way around the whole shirt. When you're done ironing all the way across the whole shirt, I just did that. So my whole first part of the hem is finished. Then the next step is just tucking it in to close this open fabric right here. Do you see how it's like, this would start to fray if you just sewed it like this. So what you're gonna do is fold it in again. The easiest way to do that is open it up. I'm gonna come a little closer so you can see. I'm gonna open it up, and I have a line right here from where I just ironed. You should have that same line. So you're gonna fold it over to that line. This is one of the easiest ways to double up that hem and close it up. And then I'm kind of finger pressing it and pushing it down. And then I'm gonna flip it over and iron that. And this is what you're gonna sew when you close that hem. And then add a few pins, hold it in place. I'm gonna show you one more time. So then you rotate it to the next part of your shirt. So all of this is open still. I'm gonna fold it over, open it up, I mean, and then fold it into that line that you just made, that crease with the iron. Fold it in and then flip it over. Tuck it in if it starts to come out, and press that down. And then add a few pins to hold it in place. So here's what my hem looks like now. Okay? Keep going all the way around the rest of the shirt. Here's what your hem should look like, with all of your pins in there, holding it in place, because now you're gonna do the sleeves. Same thing with the sleeves. I haven't sewed this down yet. I like to do all of the ironing at once, I feel like it saves on time. So now I'm gonna work on the sleeves. Again, you're gonna fold it over, go try it on. I kind of already know where I want mine to be. Mine is gonna be about 1 inch. I'm gonna iron this down, and then I'm going to just fold that inside to wherever that line was at, just like you did with the hem on the bottom. I'm going to bring it over and show you. I'll show you with one. So I actually have the other shirt that I made, and I can just, once you make one shirt, you could just compare it, or you could even write notes down for yourself. So I could see that my hem here, yeah, it's about mine is about an inch. So my first fold is going to be an inch, and then I'm going to fold it in again. Always, if you can and you have a place to do it, take notes with what you're doing. So if you've decided like me, like, oh, I pretty much always do an inch on the sleeves, I've written it down somewhere. So I can always refer back to that. It's going to be hard to remember once you start making a bunch of other kinds of clothes too. Okay, then iron that down. And then, just like the hem at the bottom, you're gonna open it up, fold it in towards that line that you just ironed, and fold it again. Tuck in any kind of stray, you might have stray threads like I did, tuck that in, and then iron that again. You should have finished all of your hems on the sleeve. Don't forget to add pins. And the bottom hem. So now let's bring it over to the sewing machine, and we're gonna start with the bottom hem because I think that's easier than the sleeves. Here we go. Bring on over that bottom hem, and let's start with one of the seams. That's where I like to start. Okay, so you're going to line up this center hole on your presser foot with, for me, I just like to get as close to that edge as I possibly can. So find wherever that's at. For me, I could see that's at a 1/2 inch. So here's a 1/2 inch on my sewing machine. I'm gonna move the bottom of my shirt down to a 1/2 inch. And my eye is gonna be tracking that 1/2 inch the whole way. So we're gonna back stitch, forward stitch, and then back stitch. And you're gonna remove your pins along the way. You know what? Look how far I am from the edge. I think I'm gonna get a little bit closer. And here's how I'm gonna get a little bit closer. I'm gonna move this edge, instead of at 1/2 inch, I'm gonna move it to 5/8 of an inch. So I'm gonna scoot it over. Actually, I'm not gonna be lazy. I'm gonna undo this. Here's why. I want you to see my mistake. Oh man. I just cut my fabric a little bit. Mistakes happen. Okay, so I'm gonna get my seam picker. And here's why I'm picking this out. I measured out a 1/2 inch, right? You just saw me do that right here. I measured out a 1/2 inch. And to me, it kind of looked like it was really close to the edge, but as you can see, it's not. You want to get as close to this edge as possible. I can get even closer, I could see. So here's a good example of just what does it look like to pick out the thread. I'm gonna go through. I'm not gonna be lazy. It's really tempting to just leave it like that, but this is not a big deal. I haven't sewn that much. I'm gonna unpick it, and I'm gonna try it again, and I'm just gonna get a little bit closer to the edge. So I'll be back. Okay, I am ready to try this again. And you might need a little bit of trial and error too, and that's okay. So what I'm trying to do is find, where am I going to line this up at? So this hole is as close to this edge as possible. For me, I think that's gonna be about 5/8 of an inch. So this is 1/2 inch. This is 5/8 of an inch on my machine. And once I put the needle down, now I could see, and you should be able to see how close I am to that edge. That's how close you wanna be. I'm gonna forward stitch and then back stitch. And as I'm sewing this hem, my eye is constantly watching this side to make sure I'm staying at 5/8 of an inch. Do you see how much closer I am now? That's about how close you want to be. And here's what it looks like on the opposite side. So remember I was telling you the hem is about an inch wide. Okay, so you're gonna go all the way around the whole shirt, removing your pins along as you go. Here's what your finished seam should look like, pretty close to the edge. If you're not really close to the edge, that's okay too. If you ended up down here a little bit, that's okay. Here's what the opposite side looks like. So this is the outside of the shirt, and this is inside. Now we're gonna work on the sleeves, and what you're gonna want to do, because the sleeves, the circumference is pretty small, you're gonna want to open up. If you have something, I don't know what this is called, so I remove this because your sleeve is gonna hook around this part right here. Let me show you. So again, I'm gonna try to start at a seam, and I just slip the sleeve in there. If I had this piece on there, it wouldn't fit on there. So every machine has, I don't know what that's called. It just, you remove it, and I also have to remove it like when I'm switching out my bobbin too. So I wonder what that piece is called. All right, again, I'm going to try to line it up as close to the edge as I can, which for me, it looks like it's gonna be under 1/2 inch. So here's 1/2 inch. I don't know what that measurement is called, but I'm just gonna try to stick to that line right there. Remove one of your pins. Don't forget to forward stitch and back stitch. Okay, and then go all the way slowly around. Let me show you really quick. That's what it looks like. I could probably get a little bit closer, but that's pretty close. That's okay too. And let me do a little bit more so you could see. I'm just kind of gripping this down here so it's not all wobbling all over the place. And my eye is still watching this side to make sure it's aligned with that line. 1/2 inch or just above 1/2 inch for me. Don't get lazy. I mean, some people leave them in, I guess, but I'm always worried that it's gonna dull the needle if you leave the pins in. Okay, I'm still in line over here. I'm almost done. And I'm always just checking my seams to make sure that nothing weird has folded right here. I'm not pinching anything. Okay, then I'm met to the point where I started at, and I'm gonna back stitch, forward stitch, and take the presser foot and trim that down. You're gonna do the same thing for your other sleeve. You're so close to being done, y'all. All we're gonna work on next is, let me show you something. It's a good thing this happened because this is a good learning mistake too. Let me trim this off so you can see. Okay. This is a pretty simple mistake that happened, so I'm actually pretty glad it happened to me so I can show you. Where was it at? Not right there, I don't think. Was it there? Oh, here it is. Okay. So here's what it looks like on the inside when I was just sewing it, right? But then when I flipped it over to the outside of the shirt, oops, I didn't even notice that it somehow bunched right there. And so when I wear this shirt, if I were to wear it like this, you would see that. It would look like an extra little crease right there. So what you're gonna do, oh man, this is not my favorite thing to do. It's so time consuming, but you have to do it because that just doesn't look good, and that's just laziness. So you're gonna unpick, I'm gonna unpick a little around that whole area. What sucks is that I backstitched and forward stitched all in that area. So it's gonna take a little bit of picking for me. And I will come back when I'm done picking it, but basically what I need to do is open it up a little bit, unpick all around this area, and then I'm going to redo it on this side, but I'm going to make sure that I'm opening it up with my fingers when I'm sewing so it doesn't do that again. Here's what I've unpicked. So there's a little, about an inch that I have to re-sew now. So I'm going to do this super careful because I don't want to do the same mistake again. And what I'm going to do to avoid that weird little pucker is I'm just pulling it a little bit more to open it up. This is going to happen to everybody. It happens to me, not all the time, but especially with linen, because linen kind of stretches and moves a little bit. So I'm going to try my best to line up this with where I already sewed. So once I put my needle down, I could see, yep, I'm still lined up with what I just sewed right now. So let me just check the back. Okay, and I'm going to pull it a little bit. I'm pulling right here just slightly. And I'm going to forward and back stitch. Oh, my thread just came out. Oh, it's just one of those days that a girl goes through. It's one of those days. I'll be back. You don't need to watch me do this. Okay. I feel like it's always when you're so close to finishing a project that something stupid like that happens. Okay, forward and back stitch. And then I'm just going to be careful that it doesn't pucker again, so I'm pulling it a little. Back stitch. Let's cross our fingers and hope that it looks great on the other side. Let's see. Okay, much better. So now I just have to trim this excess thread, and my sleeve is done on one side. I still need to finish the sleeve, so I'm going to work on that, and then let me talk to you for a second. All right, y'all, you should have finished your sleeves, the bottom hem, and the last part is the neckline. Now the neckline you're going to be adding bias tape facing to, and I'm actually going to do that in a separate video tutorial. So look out for that. That'll be coming really soon. I'm going to edit this video and post it, and then right away I'll do the next video with the neckline. The reason why I'm doing that separately is because adding bias tape facing requires a bunch of different steps, and I'd like to be really thorough and just have that as a separate video so you can go back to that for other shirts that you make, because you will need to do that process again with a bunch of other patterns. If you have any questions about shirt number 1, or if anything in this tutorial confused you, please reach out to me. I try to check the messages and the comments as often as I can. At least once a week I do that. So if you're looking for a response, you can leave a comment, or you can find me on Instagram and I will comment or help you right away, because I'm on there every day. My name on Instagram is I am Sewing Sin. I'll add that in the comments too, so you can find me if you're looking for me. And I hope that this tutorial helped you. I hope that you try this shirt because it's such a good shirt for a beginner. And yeah, thanks for joining me.